He appeared in the game, standing poised to face the final boss. Baek-Yusol was the sole character in the game who could not use magic. This lack of ability, in a world where magic was as common as bad driving, meant even the most experienced players sensibly chose to avoid him. The man was basically worse than an extra. Of course, he could use one magic, a single ability. The dragon took its stance, about to attack. But then Baek-Yusol, or rather the player, smiled. He swiftly dashed upwards using the skill Blink, dodged the dragon's attack, and landed cleanly on the floor. Baek-Yusol's Blink spell allowed him to randomly travel between 3 to 10 meters very quickly. The direction was random, so if he did not control the distance meticulously, he would die immediately due to the speed and impact, a truly out-of-the-box feature for a movement skill. The cooldown and mana usage were ridiculous, and there was a penalty, being unable to move for 2 seconds after use. Anyone could learn it, but most people sensibly chose not to. However, the player, being a special kind of masochist, had mastered the use of Blink. He could control the direction and distance, and had somehow nullified the post-use penalty. Since he did not even have a mana stat, he effectively did not use up mana, either. Unlike other spells, Blink was just a basic movement ability, but the player had become obsessed with the character, since everything depended on his peculiar skill early and for a very long time. After 10 years, the protagonist, playing as the only character in the game who did not use magic in battles, was able to swiftly deal a massive blow to the final boss, clearing the game instantly. He received the notification that he had defeated the final boss and felt a fleeting sense of joy. He was genuinely surprised that he had actually managed to kill the final boss. He dismissively stated that he knew he was covered head to toe in ancient relic grade items, but the character was still garbage. As he glared at the screen, he prepared to reflect on the community forum that he had killed the Dark Demon Dragon. Just as he was about to post, he suddenly received an alert notification which flashed multiple times, causing him great confusion. It stated that because the wrong ending had been breached, 90% of Etherworld had been destroyed. The notification then implored, "You are the closest to reaching the true ending, and so please, reach the true ending in the game." He was utterly shocked and confused by this. The protagonist was never asked for his opinion. As he would expect in such a cliché setup, he suddenly disappeared and was whisked into the game. He woke up facing a ceiling, laid out on the ground, slowly sitting up. He wondered what was happening. It was very cold, and he asked himself where he was. He looked outside, then looked into a mirror, and going closer, he was shocked to see that his appearance was that of Baek-Yusol. Suddenly a notification screen appeared. Episode 1, Escape the Chase. He realized with mounting dread that this was the Baek-Yusol prologue quest. No way, he inwardly groaned, finding the entire scenario increasingly pathetic. Checking his pockets, he found a letter, the first certificate to the Stellar Academy. He gulped, finding it hard to believe, yet acknowledging that this was definitely Etherworld. He determined he needed to be logical about this ridiculous situation. That voice had told him to reach the true ending, but from his extensive knowledge, the game did not have a true ending. It only had multiple outcomes. He then calmed himself, wondering if it could be that no one had managed to reach the true ending in the last 10 years. He gritted his teeth, saying to himself that this was no time for such navel-gazing. If his memory served him, right after Baek-Yusol woke up, the people chasing him would burst in, loudly asking where that son of a bitch had run off to. He swiftly hid back inside the hut, noticing that they were already there. One of the men then spotted the hut, screaming to his colleagues that they should go and search for him there. Baek-Yusol worried about what he should do at that very moment. He thought there was a limit to how long he could avoid them, but he certainly could not fight them either. Then the screen reappeared in front of him. You can use the skill Blink. Glaring at it, he realized he could indeed use the skill. With a body suffering from magic leakage syndrome, meaning Baek-Yusol could not accumulate mana, this one spell, the spell he had practiced fully his entire gaming life, was his single pitiful hope. Blink was the spell he had at the moment. The men were already there. There was no time left. The only thing he could do was try. As the men stood outside, they were surprised to see Baek-Yusol running through the thick snow. One of them screamed that he had found the bastard and said he would chase after him, adding that the snow would not save him from capture. And so, they ran after him. The first part of the tutorial started as he tried to avoid his pursuers by using Blink. He ran through the thick snow while his pursuers, who wore the convenience of magic boots, were faster than him. Therefore, the only way he could successfully escape was by using that one ridiculous skill. He urged himself to calm down, assuring himself that he had used this skill countless times. The timing, he thought, was burned into his muscle memory. As they caught up to him, one of them screamed, "This son of a bitch, you aren't going to stop, are you?" They were about to catch him, and he knew he had to act. Blink's main disadvantage was that, if the user failed to control the distance, they could collide with an object and die instantly. A truly hilarious way to go, he thought. but just then as they were about to slash him, he moved swiftly with the skill. He managed to keep ahead of them. One of the pursuers even wondered incredulously that this weakling was a mage, entirely unaware of the full, sad situation. Another man shouted at his colleague that they should not falter, noting that after using Blink, the user was always paralyzed for 2 seconds, so it was actually to their advantage. But then he noticed how Yusol was actually still moving. Bake Yusol paid them no mind. He only kept trying to calm himself. He thought he absolutely had to use the uneven terrain to his advantage, since players who could not learn how to control Flash at this stage would certainly not make it to the next episode. In reality, 99% of players who played Bake Yusol were unable to pass this tutorial, and even the 1% who made it past were unable to surpass the wall of blink distance control and continuous blinking. But if timed properly, one could use the skill to their advantage, and this was exactly what Bake Yusol did as he swiftly ran through the forest. The pursuer screamed at him, declaring that using Blink in this terrain was a death sentence, informing the others that those who could use magic should step forward. He ordered them to attack Bake Yusol from a distance, and the mages came forth. Bake Yusol realized they were trying to use magic against him. He knew this was the second part of the tutorial, which required him to use Blink to dodge the magic arrows flying his way. In the game, seeing everything behind you on a monitor made dodging easier, but now he was at a distinct disadvantage. Suddenly, a notification appeared. The skill Magic Leakage Syndrome was being used, and its derivative skills, Sixth Sense and Cognitive Acceleration, were activating. A surprising green aura flared around him, creating an immediate adrenaline rush. With this boost, he swiftly dodged the arrows, and just as the final one was about to hit him, he used Blink once more, bursting through the barrage. He glided low on the floor, and glancing back, he saw the massive spot where the explosion had happened. That was a truly close call. He didn't stop, immediately resuming his running. He thought the last part of this agonizing tutorial was to cross a canyon while using Blink. Up ahead was a huge chasm, a sheer drop that could decide the situation's fate. The only way across was to control the distance of his Blink perfectly. Then he could meet up with the mages waiting on the other side. To pass this part, he had to cancel the Blink spell in precisely 0.1 seconds. He realized that if he failed even once, he would certainly perish right there. 20 floating boulders, 0.1 seconds. That was a lot easier said than done. He wondered what frickin' bastard made the tutorial like this. A change of plans. However, he admitted to himself that the task was actually just about doable. The real problem, he thought, was right in front of them all. He decided the better method for his survival was simply to kill them all. He paused, turned his back, and took a second to hide. Bake Yusol knew the plan was crazy. He wondered how he could even conceive of doing this, considering he had never been in a proper fight. If this were a game, the system would naturally make it impossible to attack those who were chasing him. But no rule stated he had to blindly follow the game's system in reality. So he pulled his little dagger. The thought of killing somebody didn't bother him at all, and it wasn't simply because these men were his enemies as part of the story. It was something else, though before he could rationalize any further, they had already arrived. And so it was face to face with him and the men. One of them called out, telling his subordinates to catch that rascal, and they all dashed toward him. A man came in front, holding his spear, smirking. The man arrogantly thought, how dare he try to attack them when he was alone? The fool was done for. Bake Yusol internally calculated his target distance. If he used Blink, the man wouldn't expect it. Using the skill Blink, he swiftly dashed in front of the man, stabbing him instantly. Everyone else was utterly shocked. As the man coughed up blood, a clear feeling of power ran down Bake Yusol's fingertips. He felt no sense of guilt at all as he sliced through the man. After all, he only killed them to survive. One of them screamed that they should not let him escape at any cost. As he ran, Bake Yusol thought he had dealt with one of them, but the next attack wouldn't be easy. From a higher position, he wondered if they were using magic again, questioning if he could just dodge it. They casted a spell, a fire spell. He felt a bit tense, but then he spotted a branch in front of him and used Blink immediately, successfully dodging the skill. The people who launched the attack smugly thought, it serves him right for being so cocky and acting up. The attack must have destroyed him. But then they noticed he was no longer there. Suddenly, from the top, Bake Yusol held the dagger as he descended upon the mage who had cast the spell. However, the moment the man caught sight of Bake Yusol, it was already too late. One of the peculiarities of Blink is that it maintains the same momentum before and after its use. So, when he used the skill Blink, the momentum he used to slice the man was beyond any ordinary force. The man screamed as he fell to the ground. His subordinates watched in understandable fear, though they knew it was their turn next. Bake Yusol stood there, a bit winded, and thought that now there were only 2 of them left. He needed to end this before the 2 who had fallen behind could catch up. A calculated risk. Then, the other man spoke up. mentioning what a weird guy he was, noting his uncanny reaction speed for a mage. He asked Baek Yusol who on earth he was. Baek Yusol thought that his reaction speed was indeed faster than most professional gamers, but that was only when they were talking about games, and he certainly couldn't just keep dodging attacks forever, especially at such close range. He decided he needed to end this as quickly as possible. At this point, he was attacking them head-on. The remaining man smirked, holding his massive sword, and confidently said that he had already figured out Baek Yusol's fighting style. As Baek Yusol dashed towards them, he thought, oh, this guy uses a big sword, so there should be no problem. Meanwhile, the man on the opposing side thought that as long as he could protect his face and neck, Baek Yusol's attacks with his dagger wouldn't even scratch him. The situation was tense as the man screamed at him to come on and bring it on. Suddenly, he activated his spell, Ice Wave. Just at the same moment, Baek Yusol activated the spell Blink. The ice wave spread around the area, and the man smirked, expecting the blast to have dealt him a heavy blow already. To his surprise, Baek Yusol was not even coming for him. He was coming for the man beside him. Baek Yusol swiftly used his skill to slash the other person. The main opponent was utterly shocked by this turn of events. He mentioned that earlier, Baek Yusol kept running away like a rat who's never fought before, and now he questioned what was going on. It was a decisive moment in the brawl. Baek Yusol was internally thinking that using Blink head-on put him at risk of getting counterattacked. So the man wondered if Baek Yusol was trying to lure him into defending his front by throwing his despair, and then aiming for his side. He stated that Baek Yusol would not have his way. Baek dashed at him, throwing his spear at him swiftly. He blocked the front with despair, assuming Baek Yusol would be by his side. He sliced to the side but noticed Baek Yusol wasn't there. Suddenly he fell. A dagger pierced through his chest, right in front of him. He realized that Baek Yusol was actually coming for him straight ahead. Was he planning on attacking me at the front from the beginning? He thought in his final moment. At this point, it was already far too late. Baek Yusol then received the notification that he had passed the first stage, which was to escape. Upon receiving a notification that he had obtained Express and was promised an additional reward for uniquely developing the story by the Constellatio project, Baek Yusol became dazed. He fell to the ground, breathing heavily, and then glared at the corpses, feeling a brief sense of peace. He reflected that this was no dream. His first blink, his first battle, and his first murder were all behind him. He had killed a person to survive, which was a rather dramatic, if necessary, opening to his new life. He then stood up and dusted himself off, deciding he needed to leave that grim place immediately. Glancing at the corpses, he realized they might have some valuables, and despite a bitter aftertaste, a subtle jab at his sudden practical avarice, he decided he had to think realistically since he had no money. He found about 2 million credit, which he quickly mentally converted to approximately 2 million won, deeming it better than nothing. The immediate problem, however, was the cliff he now had to cross. Suddenly, a loud voice called from the other side of the chasm, asking if anyone was there and directing them to come closer. Baek realized it was the group of mages mentioned in the tutorial. He quickly screamed that he was over there. The mages on the other side mentioned that there was no nearby bridge and asked if he was able to cross. Baek confidently said he was on his way. The group decided to wait, as he had promised to cross, though they internally doubted him, thinking that to cross such a cliff would require at least a third-class knight. Could that young boy really manage such a feat? They simply were not sure. Then, to their genuine surprise, he did something spectacular. Baek used his blink to leap through the sea of floating rocks. Every move was flawless, a sight that truly amazed them. They wondered aloud what that was, speculating if it was a jumping type of magic, which was a rather generous interpretation of his newfound power. One of the mages, a mysterious lady with beautiful blue hair who seemed to be the leader of the group, recognized the blink skill. She questioned how that was possible, as a normal blink would not allow for control of direction and distance. Suddenly, 2 more men, who had been chasing Baek Yusol, arrived. The mages wondered if these 2 were with the boy. One of the newcomers immediately used a fire skill, catching Baek unaware. The mages urged him to watch out, and Baek's internal alarm bells went off, thinking, shit. He used blink once more to evade the attack. He worried that they were with the mercenary group from before and realized the danger. He knew the blink's cooldown was 3 seconds, making it impossible to dodge all magic with it. He desperately had to find the next floating stone that would work as his foothold. The man launched yet another skill, which Baek barely managed to dodge. However, the force of the attack affected the rock beneath him, causing him to fall off balance. He panicked, thinking that all the floating stones were too far away, and desperately hoped he would land on just one. He used blink once more, barely grabbing a nearby rock and hanging on the edge, thinking he had survived, only to have his hopes immediately shattered as another blast came roaring his way. He had no idea what to do. Just then, blue flames came roaring from the mage's side of the cliff and collided with the attacker's magic, saving Baek Yusol. The mages were completely stunned, wondering what magic they had just witnessed. An ice spear covered with lightning? Someone used 2 attributes in one magic during the tutorial, and the caster precisely calculated the trajectory without wasting any mana. Who could perform such a feat, they asked, only to realize that it was the beautiful lady with blue hair, standing there in effortless elegance. The attackers were shocked by the display, immediately turned and walked off, clearly preferring discretion over getting vaporized. Bake breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it seemed he would live after all. Bake arrived on the other side of the terrain, greeting the people there. He wanted to greet the blue-haired lady as well, but she paid him no mind. He made an effort to approach her, mentioning his thanks for her help just now. She dismissed him, saying she did not do it to receive any gratitude, so he shouldn't mind it. Bake meekly accepted her response, thinking to himself that she had the prettiest voice he had ever heard in his life, but she seemed rather difficult to approach. He then mused that the attackers were known as bandits who pillaged nearby villages, but that most of such activities were actually carried out by the dark demon cult. He reassured himself that this threat was over. The moment he escaped this cliff, he would enter the territory of the mages, and the dark demonic humans would no longer be able to pursue him, not to mention that they did not even know who he was. A comforting thought for a newly minted murderer. Suddenly he received a new notification. Episode 2. Enroll in the Stella Academy. He asked himself if this was the second episode, and then decided it did not sound like it would be hard. His only worry was how he was supposed to go through school days at this age again. Later that evening, Bake Yusal sat in the carriage, his head heavy with weariness, an impossible feeling after the long day. He let his thoughts drift into a cloudy dream of his younger self. "Mom, I'm going to be a mage when I grow up," he had exclaimed. His mother, whose face was blurry in the memory, replied that she believed in him, Yusal. His thoughts shifted to the second-hand magical text his parents had purchased after working so hard to save up. He had vowed to study diligently and make them happy. He would read for long hours into the night, forcing his mother to cover him with sheets while he slept. One day, this studious habit led to sickness. His mother rushed him to the hospital, where a doctor delivered the news. "Doctor, did you just say that my son has mana leakage syndrome?" she asked in a small voice. Bake Yusal felt a wave of despair. He thought there was no way this could be true. He then noticed the memories. Were they his own, or Bake Yusal's? It felt as if their lives were intertwined. The sun rose, its light gently patting Bake's face, rousing him. It was morning. One of his travel companions mentioned that he was finally awake, and that they had been about to wake him up. They were going to arrive in Lizowica, the satellite city of Arcanium, very soon. The carriage stopped, and the group took a short break. Bake got down and stretched for a second. He noticed the pretty lady from earlier, who he considered to have a resting, icy face, glaring at him. When he caught her looking, she quickly turned away. Bake concluded that those were clearly not butterflies. He thought that was quite cold of her, but overall things were going fine, considering how worried he had been. He felt glad the timeline leaned more toward modern times than the Middle Ages. Though magic existed in Etherworld, safe cities boasted trains, flying ships, and warp holes to make long-distance travel convenient. They were heading to Lizowica now to catch a flying ship. Lizowica was on the route to Arcanium, the city of magic, and the real episode was set to begin there. Arcanium contained renowned magic towers, mage knight orders, and 5 esteemed academies, the most powerful and student-excelling of which was Stella Academy. Naturally, Stella was full of geniuses and nobles from all over the world. He still couldn't fathom how Bake Yusal had managed to secure admission to that place. He realized. He hadn't checked his skills yet. He thought that the sixth sense and detection acceleration were the only reason he wasn't already dead. The mana leakage syndrome was a curse physique, an inherent curse on Bake Yusal that prevented him from accumulating mana within his body. However, this curse was ironically what allowed him to detect mana around him with his sixth sense, and to sense incoming attacks from any direction. Suddenly, a notification popped up. I haven't seen these. Just then, his companions called out to him, urging him to get going. He responded, deciding to check the notifications later. As he turned away, the beautiful lady briefly glared at him again. The scene cut to the airship. Inside, the cabin was bustling with people. An announcement stated that they were leaving for Arcanium, and asked everyone to take a seat for their safety. As Bake walked past, someone remarked that he looked around like some lost little kid, and wondered if he had never been on a flying ship before. They concluded he must be some country bumpkin. Another voice sneered, saying they didn't understand why Stella had to allow peasants in, adding that the influx of lowly folks sullied the waters of the world's most renowned academy. Bake briefly glared at them, feeling stupid for even having to entertain this ridiculousness. He paid them no mind and walked off, thinking kids were all the same wherever one went. The youth who had been doing the complaining got angry, yelling, "Did you just sigh at us?" The commotion stopped abruptly when someone else walked in. The guy calling out to Bake turned in confusion and muttered about why everyone was being so loud. It was Princess Bion, who walked in with her elegant poise. It was Hong Bion Adolabit, princess of the Adolabit kingdom. The guy who had been harassing Bake tried to greet her, but she only glared at him condescendingly and walked off, passing everyone in the hall as she headed towards the staircase. Bake glared at her, remembering that she was this world's villainess. Hong Bion was one of the main characters of the game and constantly argued with the main female protagonist. He recalled that she died in the end, no matter what route you chose to take. In some endings, she was brutally murdered, and in others, she was bullied by the entire academy before being expelled. In one particular ending, she went through something so shameful that she never appeared in public again. He concluded it was as if the developers had personal resentments and wanted her to suffer no matter what, a true testament to the kindness of game designers. He did hear she was really popular amongst the male players. He inwardly admitted he felt like she would probably kill him if he tried to talk to her. His stomach suddenly growled, suggesting he should eat something. He arrived at the cafeteria but saw that everything was pricey, which discouraged him, and he walked out, deciding he would just eat when they got to Arcanium. Suddenly, a loud buzzing echoed through the space, grabbing everyone's attention. An announcement stated that they would be arriving in Arcanium in 10 minutes, and asked everyone to make their way to the first floor. The announcement repeated, but Bake's thoughts were already excited. He swallowed nervously. Was it finally starting? Well, either way, this was his reality now. After a stern second of hyping up himself, Bake Yusol suddenly looked very tired of it all. He sighed, feeling quite relieved that he resolved the situation he experienced, but he really doubted his ability to survive in this so-called stellar academy. More importantly, he wondered, would he even be able to survive in this world? Staring out of the window, he lamented that he wished he had something to help him. Then a thought suddenly struck him. He had a notification he hadn't checked. He checked the notification. The Leto project offered him a special reward. 1. A downgraded version of the item he used in the game. 2. A downgraded version of the skills he acquired in the game. Glaring at the options, he figured those system lords at least had some commercial ethics. He pondered what to pick. Could he perhaps take Turning Lights or Praise of the Flash? The notification then continued, stating that the item's grade was too high and would be seriously downgraded as a result of the search. He then wondered about Hyperspace Blink. The notification said the skill was an advanced version of the Blink skill and could not be acquired. However, he could use the reward to enhance the Blink skill slightly. He was thoroughly annoyed by this, questioning the system's need to always downgrade everything. This repetitive response, which occurred multiple times, only served to heighten his irritation. "What about boo-boo glasses?" he asked. The system was silent for a moment before announcing that, according to the system examination, the item could be provided. He decided to get that particular item, and it appeared in front of him. He picked it up, internally marveling that a day had come when he would actually wear those silly things. The boo-boo glasses contained all the information he had collected while playing the game, which was critical because, in Etherworld, it had been impossible to recall and read information about hunted monsters or acquired knowledge. Thus, players developed various items to store information in their own way, and Bake Yusol had done something similar. As he put on the glasses, a screen projected a vast amount of information. The glasses, which consumed mind power to activate, remembered every piece of knowledge he had ever seen. He opened the main folder, noting the enormous amount of data, things about alchemy, hunting grounds, dungeons, monsters, characters, and the like. This was good enough, he concluded. Since this was real life, there was no way for him to grind using the game system, but with these glasses, he should be able to regain half of the ability he used to have. Suddenly, someone called out, asking if that wasn't Isle, the pretty lady with the blue hair. Another person responded, clarifying that they meant Trader Duke Molf's eldest daughter, adding a sharp, "Yikes, how dare she show her face here?" Before shushing the first person, worried Isle would hear. Bake Yusol glanced at her, realizing her name was indeed Isle. He remembered that one function of the boo-boo glasses allowed him to register or check a character's information within the story. Checking Isle's profile, he saw she was a fake heroine who was an ice and lightning mage. The profile also contained a remarkably useless piece of trivia. She drinks pickle juice first when eating pizza. She was the eldest daughter of the Molf Duchy, whose father's death had led to her family's downfall, and she would probably die later on in the story. As she quickly ran off, he thought about the significance of Isle, the fake heroine. The place he was in, Aetherworld, was a game based on the original romance fantasy novel Don't Love the Princess. That novel was about the heroine Isle, who had lost her entire family. She grew by confronting the schemes of the villainous Hong Biyong, and eventually ended up with the male protagonist. The novel received harsh feedback from its readers. The problem, however, was that while the game world was based on the novel, the story was completely different. In the game, an original character named Flame was added, who usurped the role of the heroine. This Flame character had a backstory. She was a woman living an ordinary life in the modern world who regularly enjoyed reading and was transported to this world. So, unlike the novel, Isle became the fake heroine in the game, while Flame became the real heroine. Despite numerous attempts and efforts by many players, Isle sadly could not survive in any route, which resulted in her being completely pushed away from the real heroine position. Well, that's got nothing to do with him. He felt a strange sense of familiarity with Isle, but quickly dismissed it as his imagination. He decided he should get ready to hop off the airship. They finally arrived at Stellar Academy, and everyone disembarked. Someone accepted them all, stating that, as they were already aware, the dark demonic humans were mages who had embraced otherworldly powers and transformed into monsters. Even at that moment, dark demonic humans continued their invasion by opening personal gates or liberating ancient dungeons to encroach upon the magical world from the backworld. The speaker firmly declared that their destiny as mages was to protect the world from the forces of darkness. And next up, they would have the oath ceremony for the 4 students who were admitted with high scores, as well as the freshman representative. The speaker then directed the students to come up to the podium. Baek Yusol looked around, thinking that everyone's faces shone brightly, fitting their positions as main characters. However, the brightest one among them was obviously the freshman representative, Ma Yuseo. He wondered how the student who had entered with the highest score could be so handsome and intelligent at the same time. Ma Yuseo was the character who best fit the phrase, "Throughout heaven and earth, I alone am the honored one," possessing a mana status of 9 stars and potential close to the realm of deities. He was a natural genius among geniuses who could control all the elements in this world. Even if he couldn't reach the good ending himself, Baek Yusol figured he must at least aim to avoid the bad endings by bringing Ma Yuseo to the good side. However, this entire situation was completely up to Flame, the other new character he spoke of, and depended on how she acted from here on. Since she was also from the same reality as him, getting along with her might be a good idea, but things would get complicated if she considered him an enemy and he faced rejection. Since he had the upper hand in terms of information, he decided he shouldn't have to risk anything. Flame was a romance fantasy novel possessor, and he was a romance fantasy game possessor, a difference he solemnly swore to uphold. As the speech ended, he raised his hand and then lowered it, his final thoughts concluding that his information in the story could not even be compared to that of a shop NPC in a village. The heroine possessed the special ability to cleanse the dark demonic humans. But aside from that, she even had an ability that enabled her to impoverish those around her. If being around her was going to surely affect him too, his role was to support the main characters from afar and to not get involved with them as much as possible. The people concluded the entrance ceremony, and everyone clapped in happiness. Episode 2, enrolled into Stellar Academy, had been completed. The scene shifted abruptly to the school building. Inside the large classroom space, Baek Yusol sat among the other students. He found it odd to be a high schooler again after having already graduated from university, but he conceded that having the stellar pocket watch felt quite nice. This watch, a mark of a student at the most prestigious Stellar Magic Academy, promised him better treatment than most holders of Magic Warrior licenses. He was eager to use it and get out for a bit. Then Professor Lee Hanwol, the instructor, walked in. The professor commanded everyone to sit down and announced that the exams were about to begin, ordering them to put away all items except their writing supplies. He added that anyone using glasses would be examined beforehand. Baek mused that a test following the entrance ceremony seemed excessively rigorous, even more demanding than a Korean university's curriculum, a test on the very first day. It was the class organization exam, essentially a placement test. The exam began, and Baek stared blankly at the paper, finding the questions tricky. He had no clue what they meant. The class placement exam was completely separate from the notoriously difficult entrance exam, and its results would sort students into F, A, or S classes. Naturally, most of the important playable characters would land in the S class. Baek Yusol, on the other hand, having scraped into the academy as the last of 1,141 students, was practically guaranteed to be F-class material. He briefly contemplated if he could just hand in a blank page, idly wondering what the odds of his expulsion were. He spotted Ma Yuseong, who had already finished his exam paper, an act that probably confirmed why the genius found living so dull. The very essence of Ma Yuseong's character was boredom. Born into the world's strongest family with a genius brain and talent, everything came too easily. His disposition, good or evil, would largely depend on the female lead, and the dark demonic humans, those determined to ruin humanity, were undoubtedly interested in him. Baek reflected that his own problem started with his family anyway, but looking at geniuses only made his mediocrity more glaring. Wait a second, Baek thought. Could he use the boo-boo glasses on this exam? He had certainly used them enough while playing the game to stack skills studying in the library. With nothing to lose, he decided to check and pulled them out. Suddenly, the instructor appeared, demanding to know what those glasses were. Professor Lee mentioned that he had explicitly stated that any glasses had to be checked prior to use and demanded to examine them. Bake handed them over, feeling acutely uneasy, as he realized that if the magical nature of the glasses was discovered, expulsion was a real possibility. A notification briefly alerted him that a missing part of the glasses had been sensed, and it asked if he wanted to call it. Bake internally screamed, begging the system to stay still. The instructor handed the glasses back, saying he couldn't feel any mana from them, but warned Bake to ask beforehand next time. Bake inwardly sighed a breath of relief, acknowledging that had the original functions been working, he would have been in real trouble. What a fortunate malfunction, he thought. Well, let's start then, Bake decided. Wow, he could really see the answers. This was a jackpot. What if he got first place at this rate? He was sure to escape F class and might even get into A class. The instructor declared the exam over, commanding everyone to hand over their papers. Huh? All the papers flew away from the desks with a surge of magic, heading straight for the instructor. Bake managed to scribble down answers to just 3 questions. The instructor inspected the papers, his face showing immediate shock. Just as Bake was about to take his glasses off, the professor walked right up to him. You, give me those glasses right now. Hurry! Pardon? Bake replied. The instructor muttered that there was no way, then turned to a different student, ordering him to fetch Dr. Gran. The student quickly affirmed his understanding and ran off. Bake wondered what the sudden fuss was about. He had even been careful to write down his answering process clearly so he wouldn't be mistaken for cheating. Later, the instructor asked the arriving Dr. Gran, a magic engineering professor, for his opinion. The doctor, who was appraising the glasses, stated that the fact that Bake solved the problem was definitely suspicious. Then did he Professor Lee began. But he didn't cheat, the doctor interrupted. I can't feel any magic tool energy from the glasses or any of his items. He definitely solved it with his own ability. Ho ho, how interesting. To think I'd see this in my lifetime, the doctor remarked, adding that Professor Lee Hanwell should apologize to the student and guide him well. Understood, the instructor begrudgingly said. He then apologized to Bake, stating he had made a misunderstanding. Bake admitted to himself that he had cheated, and it was pure luck that the glasses' original functions had failed. Grinning, he told the instructor that it happened, but he should please be more careful moving forward. Lucky me, as long as I don't get caught, Bake thought. Later that day, in his office, Professor Lee Han-Wool was meticulously reviewing exam papers. He sighed, acknowledging that this was indeed the lot for the current year's freshmen. He answered a sudden call from Professor Adele Timon, who immediately inquired if these were the new test results. Professor Timon then remarked that she had heard about the unusually fascinating freshmen this year, to which Professor Lee Han-Wool affirmed. The class was stocked with the most distinguished families in fire class magic, the Calvin Empire's chosen crown prince successor, handpicked at the ripe old age of 12, purely for his magical brilliance, and extraordinary individuals from the world's most impressive magic tower, the Full Moon Tower. She commented that setting the examination questions must have been a nightmare with such an assembly of elite students, but she assumed the questions were quite engaging. He replied that he was pleased they met her approval. Professor Lee Han-Wool explained that this year's class placement tests included a new style of question, specifically the first 3. These questions were intentionally difficult for students who relied solely on conventional study methods, designed as flexibility tests. The core intent was twofold. Could a student quickly skip a problem they clearly could not solve and move on? And second, how would they approach a problem that was not covered in any of their study textbooks? The era of magic dominated by rote memorization and theory was over. The present was all about combat, demanding quick judgment and creative thinking. The professor internally chuckled, thinking that these questions weren't even intended to be solved. In fact, over 1,000 of the 1,141 students had simply skipped them. Of the mere 100 who attempted the trio, most failed to score a single correct answer. Only 3 students managed to solve all 3 questions. Ma Yusong, the so-called prodigy of the century whose origins were a delicious mystery, Flame, a commoner recognized for her innate talent and admitted on the principal's personal recommendation, whose score was neck and neck with Ma Yusong's. And then there was Bake Yusol, who popped up out of absolutely nowhere. He was quite certain Bake Yusol had the most pathetic admission score. He certainly hadn't expected the boy to solve all 3 of the creative problems, especially given that he had completely flubbed every other section. Professor Timon mentioned that she had been wondering why he was so obsessed with the new student scores. Now she understood that one particular score simply defied logic. She remarked that a student had managed to solve the problems that countless formulas and equations could not touch, yet done so without demonstrating any actual knowledge. Professor Lee Han-Wool pondered whether this child might actually be a genius. She countered that it could very easily be a coincidence, noting that even a broken clock is right twice a day. They exchanged a brief, meaningful glare. Then he looked away with a sigh. He scowled at Baek-Yusol's papers. He read the attached note. Granted special admission since his ability to control blink was held in high regard. So the child whom the principal personally pushed through was different, he mused. He briefly smirked. He said that they would discover soon enough whether this mage combat student specializing in blink was a flash of genius or merely a statistical fluke. The scene shifted to the hallway, where a group of students walked briskly, one mentioning that the class assignments had been posted to the bulletin board. Baek-Yusol was walking among them. He thought to himself that having to check his class assignment in person was an unnecessary drag. He repeatedly voiced his irritation about having to check his assignment in person. As everyone checked their placement, C class, D class, and so on, Baek-Yusol arrived, and people immediately began to stare at him, muttering and confirming to one another that this was indeed the boy. They exclaimed their utter disbelief that a student who scored a 0 in the magic application section of the entrance exam could somehow gain entry into Stella, questioning the academy's standards. Baek-Yusol, who clearly didn't give 2 copper coins about their opinions, mentally shrugged off their ramblings. He thought he would simply check his class and leave, as the whole thing was beneath his notice. He scanned the lists F, E, C, but his name was nowhere to be found. A sudden, sharp realization hit him. They hadn't failed him just because he'd only solved the 3 questions, had they? No way, he thought, already mentally drafting his own eulogy. A nearby commotion drew his attention. Someone exclaimed in surprise, wondering what the heck was going on, and another voice called it a mistake, insisting something was gravely wrong. The general murmuring and rambling intensified, and Baek-Yusol, thinking that something peculiar was afoot, decided to investigate. He walked over and was utterly baffled by what he saw. His name, Baek-Yusol, was listed under S class. Why is my name here? He wondered, utterly confused. This must be wrong. S class, the most special grade and the universal dream of all students, was reserved for the most elite at Stella Academy. Unlike other grades with multiple classes, S class had only a single class with a mere 41 students. This is a mistake, he thought, feeling his sanity slip away. He immediately realized that he would now be constantly running into the main characters in S class. Getting involved with the protagonist would only accelerate his already precariously short lifespan. He couldn't even change his class assignment now, so he concluded that he would just have to manage and try his absolute best to keep a low profile. As he walked away, the Lady Flame glared at him, not uttering a word, but her shock was palpable, mirroring that of everyone else. The scene shifted abruptly to the princess's castle. Inside, she saw her mother strike her face. Her mother was shouting that she had gotten 3 questions wrong. The woman, identified as Hong Yo, the elemental class fire element professor, reminded her that even Princess Izel of the Falling Moth Duchy had managed to answer 2 questions correctly. The princess in question, Hong Myeon, fell to the ground. The professor continued her verbal assault, saying that being unable to answer questions that even those insects got right meant her daughter was lower than an insect. Hong Byeon should think of herself as a bug and do the exercise again. She asked if Byeon understood. Yes, mother, Byeon replied to her professor mother. Her mother, looking thoroughly disappointed, stared hard and told Byeon she could not afford to become like her, a woman who was chased out of the kingdom and was now clinging to some stupid professor position. Byeon absolutely could not become the kingdom's shame. Hong Yo then bent down, getting face to face with her daughter, and demanded that she had to become a better existence than her sister. She made sure Byeon understood. Hong Myeon stared back at her mother and responded, saying, "Of course, mother." Truly, though, the words made no sense to her. She just lived the way she was taught and solved problems composed of magic the way she was shown. She had not learned spells. She had not learned formulas. So why was her mother tormenting her? It was very strange. The scene then cut back to the Stellar Academy, inside their massive classroom. Baek-Yusol sat there, thoroughly stressed, and thought that he was completely screwed. Of course, he noted, he was assigned to a place chock full of asocial students. Not that he intended to try and hang out with high schoolers. Anyway, from a corner someone whispered, asking just how he managed to be there. That's what I'm saying, another chimed in, claiming he just couldn't figure it out. Murmurs spread around the room. People were reporting that their parents had protested and asked why he was in the S class. The only response given was that Baek-Yusol had the qualifications to be in the S class. Really, that doesn't make any sense, the murmurs persisted. Baek-Yusol was zoned out. He realized it certainly looked like he was an outcast. Then again, he mused, they had been working hard since they were young, so it would be frustrating if a dunce like himself was in the same class as them. Well, one's class changed according to performance after every test, so that was fine, and the S class was not exempt from that. Of course, Nian, he remembered. There were very few classes where someone was demoted. Now that he thought about it, he recalled that there would be a male student who raised from the A class to the S class later. Well, I'll find out later, he concluded. Still, it was pretty amazing to think that these game characters were in front of him. In a few years, most of the students in this class would become famous worldwide. And, he added mentally, about 5 of them had the possibility to betray the magic world. Ma Yuxiang was one of them. If Flame could stop that from happening, that would be nice, he considered with mild hope. Then the professor walked in, the first instructor. Everyone should settle down, he commanded. They all glared at him. He took his position and informed them that it was nice to meet everyone. He was sure some of them had seen him before, but he would still introduce himself formally. He said he was the professor of the S class, Li Hanwo. The murmurs continued. One student mentioned that he was the famous professor whose number of hunted dark demonic humans had almost reached 4 digits. They called him the 7th class magic warrior. He truly was on a whole other level, the professor continued, telling everyone to settle down. He observed that a lot of talented students were present, and a very unique student was there as well, a clear reference to the protagonist, Baek Yusol. He reminded them that, as they all knew, this academy was a place where they fostered combat mages. As magic warriors, they would experience a vigorous high school education over 3 years. He did not expect any of them to follow all the rules, however. He would like for all of them to show him their best within that time frame. He asked if there were any questions. The entire class was silent. Good, he then said, and added, Then, let's start the class. Beside him, Hongbian walked into the class, arriving very late, which was unlike her usual punctuality. Baek Yusol noted with surprise that Hongbian, who followed the rules more than anyone, was late. She walked up to the professor, explaining something to him. Baek Yusol wondered if something had happened. He then put on his glasses, the boo-boo glasses, so that he could check out what was going on. He checked her character window, which showed she had an evil mother. But that wasn't it, he decided. He also noticed that she was guaranteed to die. He considered that if Aizel died because of Flame, Hongbian died because of both Flame and Aizel. He thought that one might call it the inevitable fate of the villainess. He wanted to save her if he could, but he was not really in any position to help someone else. The professor told her that she should go and sit in her seat. Baek Yusol took off his glasses, feeling bad but concluding that he could only keep his distance. Surprisingly, she walked up to where he sat, glaring at him but actually paying him no mind. He glared at her back as she took her seat and sat down elegantly. What is this, he thought, noting that this feeling that things were getting twisted right from the start was very uncomfortable. The professor mentioned to the gathered students that a staff succession ceremony would precede the start of class, noting that students from the S class and A class would participate together. Baek Yusol considered the whole ceremony somewhat annoying but admitted to looking forward to it, acknowledging it as one of Stellar Academy's 2 major events, the other being the familiar contact ceremony. For an institution of Stellar Academy's standing, the staff succession was appropriately special. All the students stood outside where the ceremony was to be held. The instructor told them that various staves, ranging from the lowest to the middle-high class, were prepared. All they needed to do was approach a staff they liked and grab it. He also mentioned that the process for switching a staff once selected was complicated, urging them to choose carefully. Yusol inwardly scoffed, thinking the instructor was missing the point. In Aetherworld, the staffs chose the user, resonating only with a person they deemed worthy of commanding them. It meant high-level staves weren't available just because someone wanted one. The staff selection began. Yusol mused that in the past he might have aimed for an F-class staff, but his new S-class status demanded a careful choice. He reflected that the wand was the best fit for his position, noting that staffs typically divided into the short-form wand, favored by the Knight class for quick magic spam, and the long-form staff, used by the Bishop class for single, powerful hits with longer casting times. Someone called out to Yusol, wondering aloud which staff he would pick. As he turned, they continued their discussion, speculating that an S-class student should have no problem achieving resonance. Yusol ignored them, thinking their opinions were utterly irrelevant. Someone called him again, and Yusol turned back, facing a person who seemed needlessly annoyed. He inquired about the person's identity. The person stated, "I am Uslek." Yusol, demonstrating zero interest, simply replied, "I'm Baek Yusol. Nice to meet you." He wondered who this person was, having never heard the name before. Uslek then asked Yusol which staff he planned on picking. "Just anything," Yusol replied flippantly. Uslek glared, then smirked, saying Yusol should pick a staff that matched his status as a commoner and avoid making a commotion for the professors. Yusol was taken aback by the sheer idiocy of the comment. He walked away, suggesting to Uslek that he too should avoid causing trouble. Uslek was infuriated, calling Yusol a bastard and asking if he was picking a fight. Yusol exhaled, finding the guy thoroughly annoying. He pulled out his glasses to glare at Uslek, recognizing him instantly. The son of Marquis Czech Balin, Prince Jeremy's underling, a third-rate bully. Yusol dismissed him as such an extra that he barely registered. Uslek announced that he would pick that one and ordered Yusol to watch carefully. He indicated the Edmari Atimiri staff, clearly the highest class staff available, a middle-high class staff typically used by pro-magic warriors. Yusol noted that middle-low class staffs were generally the student limit, since even professionals struggled to handle them. He also registered the presence of another middle-high class staff, which the instructor had likely brought only to show off. The instructor then told everyone to stand in front of their desired staff, and the selection commenced. A lot of resonance erupted. People exclaimed their surprise, noting that Hei Wanriang had picked the Hayden Emiko 10, a middle-class staff, and that Princess Scalvin had also chosen a middle-class staff. Students were already securing good staves, and the amount of successful middle-class choices was deemed crazy. The boy who had argued with Yusol muttered, "Damn it," then walked toward the high-class staff Uslek had pointed to, completely convinced he could resonate with it. He glared at the staff, internally demanding that everyone watch his imminent display of talent. He reached out his hand, thinking he would demonstrate his prodigious ability. But as he grabbed the staff, a jolt of lightning erupted. The staff rejected him, just as Yusol had expected. The boy lay dazed on the ground. A good laugh was probably had by a few students. A shock to the system, literally. Ma Yuxiang then walked toward the same staff, smirking, already feeling that the staff was his. Yusol thought to himself that the rightful owner of that staff had indeed been decided. Ma Yuxiang. Murmurs erupted as Yuxiang approached, students wondering if he would attempt to take the staff. One student doubted even he could handle the Edmari Etiamiri. Yuxiang reached out, grabbed the staff, and the resonance was almost instantaneous. A bright, almost blinding light flared. After a moment, Yuxiang smirked. The process a success. He held the staff. Students murmured in disbelief. An incoming student had managed to take a high mid-class staff. Yusol wasn't surprised. This was expected. Now many more people would recognize Yuxiang's prodigious talent. Suddenly, Ma Yuxiang glared at Baek Yusol and, weirdly enough, smirked. Yusol was taken aback, wondering if the male lead had lost his mind. Yusol turned his attention away, noting that Flame also owned another high mid-class staff, Terry Vaughn, but had not yet approached it. This was exactly what Yusol wanted, yet he knew this could be where the path diverged. He reflected that if Flame successfully grabbed Terry Vaughn, Ma Yuxiang would take interest in her genius, initiating the Ma Yuxiang route. If she chose another staff, a different route would open entirely. He concluded that he needed to use Flame as his lead to bring Ma Yuxiang to their side. He spotted the staff, and, as if by fate, Flame was walking toward it. He watched her, sweat dripping down his brow, thinking anxiously about her next move. She walked elegantly, looking at the staff. Yusol wistfully hoped she would grab it, thus drawing Ma Yuxiang's interest. To his surprise, she simply walked past the staff. Yusol was shocked, thinking, what, she wasn't interested in Terry Vaughn? He wondered if she didn't know about it, or lacked sufficient information. Either way, this was bad. The female lead, Flame, should be able to resonate with any staff. He feared she might pick some strange staff, making them lose access to other good routes. At this point, he decided he had to intervene. He used the blink skill, tossing himself toward her and slightly patting her body. Unknown to her, she turned, shocked by the sudden event. He mentioned that he was merely wondering which staff she planned to choose. Folding her arms, she asked why he wanted to know that. He said he just wanted to help because she looked lost. She retorted that it was none of his business which staff she wanted to choose. Turning away, she said, "All right then, bye." He reached out to call her back, but she ignored him. Yusol scratched his cheek, finding her behavior strange. Flame was supposed to be a highly social, friendly person. He decided he couldn't give up. His very life depended on this. He called out again, pleading that he truly wanted to help her pick one. She shouted at him to mind his own business. He persisted, saying he felt there was a staff that was perfect for her right there. She warned him sternly, asking what the hell he knew about staffs. Yusol recoiled, wondering if he had done something wrong, or if she simply didn't care for extras. He then offered an apology, adding that he had heard a lot about her, then pointed at the Terry Vaughn staff he had in mind, asking if she thought she was capable of grabbing that one. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. An unseen force gravitated toward him, and all at once he found himself holding the Terry Vaughn staff. He was utterly shocked. This was not supposed to happen. Why is this in my hand? He wondered, agitated. Flame was supposed to take this. He looked at Flame, who was glaring at him. Then she smiled and asked, "Why?" He responded, "Nothing," clearly uncomfortable. He knew he was royally fucked. Sometime after the selection, students walked around, murmuring. They spoke about how 2 students this year had successfully grabbed and resonated with high mid-class staffs, calling it a historical event, increasing the number of people who had done so by 2. One student mentioned that one of the successful students had only used Blink during the magic manifestation exam. Another student found this impossible, saying their parents considered Blink a rare garbage magic. Flame listened to the comments but said nothing. Later, at the self-study hall, Flame was walking past the hallway in the building, thinking to herself that it had finally gotten quieter. The news about the 2 students had spread instantaneously everywhere she went. She still couldn't understand it, especially how he had managed to grab Terry Vaughn. Just who is he, she wondered. She remembered reading the original novel 3 times. A character named Baek Yusol had never appeared once. And in the novel, nobody was able to grab Terry Vaughn. His ability to resonate with it so easily made her wonder if he was trying to show off to her. She decided it was pointless to dwell on it. Someone called out, asking if Flame was going to study alone too. She turned and smirked, asking them if they thought she was a nerd or something. They countered that she always ended up studying when she had nothing else to do. She denied it, saying again, "So you kids really do think I'm a nerd, huh?" The person then asked why she always called them kids when they were the same age. Flame smirked and said it was just a habit, apologizing and noting that she had always been treated as older where she used to live. She realized that since she was a novel protagonist from the present, she couldn't exactly act like a child. The person then asked if she would study alone today. Flame glared, recognizing the person as Jackie. She noted that Jackie's style seemed a bit similar to hers, but recalled that Jackie had been a little tacky before. Flame said she wouldn't be alone. A special supplementary meeting was coming up, and she planned to attend that. "Anyways, I'm off." They said, "All right, let's go to a cafeteria together next time." She waved them off and walked away. As she left, she sighed, reflecting that girls at this age made being a student quite hard. Suddenly, as she was about to turn the next corner, she bumped into someone, holding her head and saying, "Ouch." Someone called her name. It was Hei Wonriang. She glared at him as he glared back. He asked if she was okay. She replied, "Yeah, I'm fine." After a brief silence, he noted that her expression didn't look good, and asked if something was wrong. She glared, wondering if he was worried about her. Not particularly," she responded. "I see," he said. He asked if she was going to study. She said yes, and then noted that he was heading to the S-Class exclusive training hall, right? He replied that one couldn't afford to be lazy with daily training. She found his sincerity unnecessary, saying it with a hint of annoyance. He said that was an odd thing for her to say. "Ah, is that so?" she replied. They glared at each other for a bit, surrounded by silence. Then he smirked, slightly tapping her arm, and said, "See you later." He walked off. She watched him leave but quickly dismissed him, turning around and thinking, how bland. Just in front of her, she noticed that Jackie was glaring at her. She waved, wondering why Jackie was still there, but Jackie immediately ran off. Flame thought that was strange but decided it didn't matter and wasn't the time for that. She walked off, heading straight to the self-study hall. She remembered that, according to the original novel, Aizel and Hong Bion would attend this special supplementary meeting. She thought it would be important to watch the female lead and the villainess of a romance fantasy face-off. Opening the door and walking inside, she glared at the people around, observing that all the important characters were here. She noted that the host was A-Class Kyle, who looked taken aback. A supplementary meeting to improve grades, with famous S-Class students participating, was a given. She found a space and sat down, noticing that Ma Yuxiang was even there. Ma Yuxiang was seated beside Baek Yusol, looking all buddy-buddied up in front of him. She thought it was definitely no coincidence that Ma Yuxiang, whom she considered the male lead, was interested in Baek Yusol. Yusol had solved nothing other than the 3 questions from Hell. She became very suspicious of Baek Yusol, thinking perhaps he knew from the start that solving those questions would grant him entry into the S-Class. Flame considered that if Baek Yusol had truly known the answer beforehand and was simply acting clueless, that made him genuinely dangerous. Meanwhile, Baek Yusol felt utterly fed up with Ma Yuxiang's insistent affection. He desperately wished someone would take Ma off his hands. Ma Yuxiang asked him why he came to the remedial session, saying he didn't need to listen to such basic things unless there was some special reason. Baek Yusol responded with a forced chuckle that he had no special reason, saying he was simply told to participate because of his abysmal grades. He inwardly glared at Ma Yuxiang, wondering why the man was so intensely interested in him. Then Kyle called everyone's attention. Kyle, a mere student tutor, then quickly cut in, saying that was enough chit-chat. He continued by announcing that today they would look over the placement exam problems. He mentioned that these specific problems were known for their ridiculously high difficulty, which earned them the nickname the 3 questions from Hell. Kyle then smugly revealed that he had managed to solve one of them. As he said this, he internally cursed. He was shocked that there were actually competent people in the class. He had planned on expanding his influence by simply teaching a bunch of stupid, noble bastards. Glaring around the room, his eyes settled on Baek Yusol. He decided this was actually his chance. He had heard the Baek Yusol kid got the lowest score on the placement exam. He smirked, internally vowing to show everyone that he was superior to Baek Yusol. He then announced he would demonstrate his solution first, calling the problem a kind of trap designed to lead students into error. As Kyle worked through his method, Ma Yuseong peered at Baek Yusol and asked what he thought, wondering if Kyle was correct. Baek Yusol glared back, inwardly confused. Did he think Kyle was right? Baek Yusol thought he didn't even understand what Kyle was trying to do, and he certainly had no idea what the heck the 3 questions from hell even were. Whatever, he internally sighed. He decided to just be honest and replied that no, he did not know. People immediately began to whisper, asking, "What? Is Baek Yusol saying that Kyle's solution is wrong?" Baek Yusol suddenly felt anxious, wondering why everyone was staring at him. Then, the student tutor Kyle snapped his chalk and questioned, "I'm doing it wrong?" He then challenged Baek Yusol to come down and solve the problem himself. Baek Yusol glared back, genuinely confused, because he didn't think he had said anything wrong. What kind of problem was this, he wondered. He glanced at Ma Yusong, who told him he could do it. Baek Yusol finally realized Ma Yusong had asked him that question deliberately, probably just to put him in this awkward spot. Resigned, Baek Yusol rose from his chair and walked toward the board, muttering under his breath, "I'll just get this over with, I guess." He took a piece of chalk, adjusted his glasses, and mused that the 3 questions from hell sounded more like a porn quiz, really. He then decided to give them an example to spice up the tedious moment. A mage cast a spell, saying, "Dear Earth, shed tears," and there was double the amount of dirt than before. Why was that? The answer, he explained with an utterly straight face, was simple. If dirt cries, it's in a state of decompression. He acknowledged that it was ridiculous to him too, but insisted that this was precisely the nature of the actual problem. Who came up with this damn problem? He explained to the class that the guy up there, referring to Kyle, solved the problem like it was a mere math problem, talking about the soil splitting when it cries or whatever. Baek Yusol reported that Kyle's method was wrong, but he had managed to get the right answer by a total stroke of luck. He asserted that if Kyle were given another similar problem, he would surely get it wrong. He then stated out loud that he couldn't actually show them the proper way to solve it, but he could point out where Kyle went wrong. Kyle was surprised and questioned him. Baek Yusol then said the problem mentioned Earth, but what if it had been water or wind? Would Kyle's method still work then? Kyle seemed momentarily flustered and stammered that he would just use a different method. Baek Yusol coolly pointed out that he would then have to do everything completely differently. He told Kyle flat out that he only got the answer because of luck, not because he followed the test maker's intended logic. Kyle tried to redeem himself, but then quickly shut up because he had nothing left to say, silently agreeing that Baek Yusol was actually right. Anyway, he then said this was supposed to be the actual way to solve it and proceeded to work it out. As he did, everyone in the room actually took notes. Flame was genuinely shocked, noting that he really did have the right solution. How was this possible? She thought. The other students were furiously writing down his method. She also observed that Azel and Hongbian should have already gotten into an argument, but both were completely engrossed in the problem. Was this okay? She wondered. Later that evening, Ma Yuseong said to Baek Yusol that he would see him tomorrow and walked off, waving. Baek Yusol waved back, but inwardly thought, fuck, if I get involved with someone like Ma Yusong, forget tomorrow, I don't want to see him again for the rest of my life. He thought it was probably because of the stupid telephone, which he couldn't even use right now, that he had caught Ma Yusong's attention. He just couldn't understand why Ma Yusong came to him, as no one used a phone except Flame in the original story. Just then he spotted Hongbian in front of him. He thought to himself, isn't that Hongbian? Is she waiting for someone? He decided it had nothing to do with him, and started to quickly walk past. Suddenly, to his surprise, she called out, Baek Yusung, and he stopped and looked at her. She then said she had something to ask him. He was shocked, thinking, the Hongbian wants to ask me something? What is it? He asked her. She then asked why he hadn't explained the full solution earlier. He thought to himself that it wasn't that he hadn't explained it. It was that he couldn't. How could one logically explain sheer nonsense? He thought she must be misunderstanding something. He simply replied that he just didn't have anything to say. She paused for a minute and then said she understood. She then suggested that he hadn't wanted to announce his solution in a place like that, right? That's not it, he thought. But then she offered, then I'll compensate you. What? He asked her. She confirmed that she would compensate him fairly, so he should explain whatever he had in mind to her. He felt utterly puzzled and pissed off by her assumption. A short while later, they found themselves seated in the library, with papers spread on the table in front of them. He told her he didn't understand why she was paying him just to understand 3 questions on the placement test. She simply said she had her reasons, so he should just tell her. He sarcastically replied, "Yes, yes, of course, my lady." He then added, "But you only got these 3 questions wrong. Aren't you embarrassed to ask me for help, the person who got all the other questions wrong?" "Not at all," she said. The only embarrassing thing was the fact that she still didn't know the solutions to those problems. She added that if she could find the answer, she was willing to do anything. She sounds like a model student, he thought. He then asked why she had asked him specifically. He pointed out that she was a princess and must have many friends she could ask. She faltered for a second, unable to say something, but then explained that out of all 1,141 freshmen, if one counted the people who got the 3 questions from hell right, there were only 3 people, including him. She then revealed that those 3 questions were meant to be unsolvable. She said Ma Yuseong Flame, and he had managed to solve them. Holding the paper, he was stunned and said, "No, wait, these were 3 questions meant for nobody to solve?" She confirmed that, asking if he hadn't realized that while solving them. He sank back in his chair, thinking to himself, "These insane people. Now I know why I'm in the S class and why Flame held me back. I didn't know all the details of the world building. I didn't even know there were 3 questions like these." He continued his internal assessment, noting that Flame was different because she had read the entire novel. Even if she didn't know the game story, she must have known most of the story's settings, such as the 3 trick questions. He concluded that since he, an extra who wasn't in the original story, had butted his head in, Flame had no choice but to acknowledge the existence of Baek Sol. So there was a reason for her to act that way, he thought. "Why do you look like that?" "Don't worry about it," he said. He then looked at her and reminded her that she hadn't forgotten that she would grant a request of his. "And thanks for helping her solve the questions, right?" "Yes," she responded. He then said he had a simple request. "Alter my staff into a magic sword. The blacksmiths of your kingdom should be able to do that easily." She immediately questioned why he, a mage, would use a weapon that only low-level mercenaries used. He told her it fit his style, so she should just do it. He thought to himself that he really didn't feel like explaining to her that he was a cripple. He then asked her, "So are you going to do it or not?" She was silent for a moment, clearly not sold out by her own power. But then she said, "Sure, I'll do it. That sort of thing should be easy." Nice, he thought to himself. He then said, "Great, then I'll tell you the way to solve this question first. This method is a change of perspective," he said, pointing at the paper. "A change of perspective?" she asked. He then thought that Hongbyon's weakness was that the magic she used was strictly textbook, and that she was stuck in a rut. He knew she only realized this in her 2nd year, after losing to Flame in a significant way. He didn't think he could even give her any important insight right now, but he could push her in the right direction. With that in mind, he asked her, "Do you know what a nonsense quiz is, by any chance?" Hongbyon looked at him and asked, "Nonsense? I think I've heard of it." Baek Sol then said he would give her an example. "What's between a knee and a knee?" She thought for a second, and then answered, "The back of the knee." Baek Sol said, "Nope, the answer is and." She wondered how, and he told her, "I asked what's between a knee and a knee, remember?" She went silent for a second, but then became very mad at Baek Sol. Baek Sol told her, "Come on, don't glare at me like that. Calm down and look at this question. If you don't know the formulas and techniques, that means you have to solve it solely using your creativity. But would it be possible to memorize creativity?" She glared at him and said no. Baek Sol then smirked and said, "Of course not. Look at this. It's not easy to memorize them by just looking at the numbers. The most important thing is to look at the world beyond the boundaries of your thoughts. Magic can grow with even the smallest change, but you just think about things as you see them. Spells aren't just about memorizing and casting them. You might be better than me at analytical skills, but you lack the most important quality of a mage, which is creativity." She kept quiet in that moment, folding her hands because what he said was undeniably true. Baek Sol thought to himself, wow, the look on her face is way too serious. He tried to lighten the mood and asked her, "You understand everything I said, right? Even though it sounds kind of complicated." She glared at him with a newfound enthusiasm and said, "Of course I understood." Baek Sol was genuinely surprised, noting, "That's fascinating. I had no idea what I was even talking about." He then said he was glad she understood and suggested they start right away. "Why did the man say to the horse while putting him to bed?" She responded, "I don't know." He then gave her the answer, "It's past your bedtime. Why don't birds work hard?" "I don't know," she responded once more. He said because they are always lying down on the job. He then asked, quote, "What happened when rock, paper, and scissors entered a race?" She looked away once more and said, "I don't know." He then answered, "Rock began to roll, but paper and scissors were stationary. Get it?" because they don't move and they are stationary. At this point, she became very angry. She exclaimed, "What? What is this?" Baek Yusol thought, "Oops, she will explode any moment now." He then asked, "Then what did the clouds say to the ocean when it was raining?" She thought for a second, and Baek Yusol also inwardly hoped she would know this one. But then she said, "I'm getting a bit emotional." Baek Yusol exclaimed, "Oh, you got it right." She was very happy and pleased by this. Looking at her, Baek Yusol thought to himself, "Wow, this is my first time seeing her smile, both in the game and in reality." He then told her, "As expected of a princess, your creativity is on another level." She coughed and said, "All right, that's enough. Give me the next question." He smiled at her and said, "Okay, then the next question is." They continued their conversation into the late hours, and after that, they both went their separate ways. Baek Yusol, on his way to his beach home, looked extremely tired. He had ended up spending 3 hours on those nonsensical questions with Hong Byeon. He hadn't expected her to actually believe what he said. Ugh, the swarm of memories of his past blunder. He then thought to himself that Hong Byeon was undoubtedly an excellent magician with a sharp mind, but her weakness was her rigid way of thinking. He felt kind of guilty for exploiting that weakness, even though she was the villainess. He knew he needed to quickly modify his staff, Trevan, into a magic sword, so he was able to do more. Well, it's not like I can do anything about what I've already done, he decided. Enough thinking, I should hurry and buy the books I need for college. And for that reason, he went to buy the books he needed for college. Arriving at the location, he thought, "Is it around here? I can't quite remember." He then noticed a place and realized he had found the store he was looking for. Walking into the store, he noted that it looked pretty run down, but he knew the bookstore, whose owner had a perverted habit of always assuming it was closed and falling asleep while watching his customers. In this nameless, discreet bookstore was hidden the study notes of Mila, the student who had graduated at the top of Stellar Academy 10 years ago. In the game, the study notes would appear with the press of a button, but in real life he needed the textbook for the major. On top of that, depending on the textbook used, the rate at which his grade increased would be different. In the beginning, he had bought textbooks from famous bookstores, but he found out later that there were good textbooks hidden in stores without any signatures. As he walked through the bookstore, he thought that if he were to take a magical engineering class while holding on to the study notes of Mila, he was almost guaranteed to get full marks. Well, just wearing the boo-boo glasses will get me decent grades, but I'll be able to figure out the hidden recipe, he thought. And so, he finally found the book he was looking for. Here it is. As he tried to reach out to it, suddenly someone else was reaching out to it at that moment. Looking at the person to find out who it was, he noticed it was Izel who was glaring at him. Thanks for watching, guys. The next part will be out soon. See you then.